about the huge opportunity that is, of course, Class MA, this new development right that's come out just recently that kind of gives us some really interesting opportunities. And of course, to help me understand and help me sort of talk through this opportunity, I have none other than, of course, my big brother, Simon. Hi, Simon, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks very much, Paul. Nice to see you. Long time no see.
Long time no see indeed. Long time no see indeed. Feels like not long enough. But anyway, let's move on. So I suppose really, Simon, just kind of to start the sort of the day-to-day, perhaps you could sort of talk about where's this all kind of come from. In fact, that's my little alarm reminding me to make sure we start the webinar on time, and that's what that's just done. So fortunately, we're looking good. So maybe you could start, Simon, with running us through kind of where all this has come from and kind of where these ideas came from.
Yeah, sure. So I guess just to help the audience, put a bit of context around where we've come from and how we've got to where we are. So I guess we're talking about Class MA commercial conversions. So I guess back in the day, about 10 or 11 years ago, Paul, we were sort of buying our own little developments and opportunities in around the West Midlands. A good example of that one is this pet shop in Warwick Street in Leamington Spa. So if I remember rightly, you have I'm the older brother, aren't I, Paul? So yeah, I've got slightly problems remembering certain things. But anyway, if I remember rightly, it was probably an owner-occupier for about 35 years. Yep. I think, if I remember right, Pets at Home would just open up a box around the corner on Myton Road. So clearly, things are changing quite a lot. And this was a proper old school sort of pet shop. It reminded me of sort of the Monty Python sketch of the dead parrot sort of scene. But fundamentally, if I remember, it came to a local agent, Reeves and Partners at the time, and they said, look, these guys are looking to sell it. But if you start to look at the shop, and obviously if you look at it, it's all sort of based on the outside ground floor space. It's the sort of Zone A space. But as soon as you started walking inside the building, the first floor, and certainly the second floor, some of these parts of the building hadn't been touched or haven't been entered, I think, for like decades almost. It was sort of dusty and ridiculous. So you sort of look at this building and say, well, actually, fact, the building is kind of all about Zone A, Zone B, Zone C, and sort of storage. And it's just sort of diminishes in value as you go away from the sort of shop front. But in actual fact, when you start looking at those sorts of opportunities and say, well, what could I do with it? What are the sort of alternative uses? What's the residential values? It starts to become abundantly clear, actually, the value is in mainly the upstairs, not the downstairs. And this one also had quite a nice yard at the back, and it had I think a coach house from a long time ago that hadn't been, again, it was just rack and ruin, but great precedent because you've got an empty building with 4 walls, but an opportunity to do something with it. So long story short, if I remember right, we carved out the shop downstairs. That went off as a coffee shop. So there's a ground floor shop downstairs with a basement. We blocked the internal wall up and opened it upstairs on the left-hand side. And we did the shop, Coffee Architect, which I think is one of the most popular independent coffee shops in Leamington Spa. And then upstairs we put 7 student rooms, and then at the back I think we did 12 or 13 student rooms. So
7 and 5, I think, wasn't it? 2 flats.
5, yeah. So we did 2 flats at the back. So it was 12 and 7 at the front, so 19 rooms in total, wasn't it? So we basically took a shop which was all about the downstairs and redundant space and converted that into a shop, pretty much the same rent, same value for the shop itself, and put a sort of 17, 19 student rooms.
Sorry to cut across them, but I think where this all kind of came from, we did another one kind of around the corner from this on the parade in Leamington, and I seem to remember you saying to me you're reading the valuation report of that for the bank when we were buying it, and as part of that, it was sort of saying, well, this is the breakdown of the rental level for this particular building. Again, same sort of thing with all the upper parts, part of that retail unit. And sort of saying, well, actually, the first floor had got £5 a foot rent, the second floor had got £2 a foot rent. We're paying 6% net for this building, and so we were literally paying like whatever that is, like £20 a foot for some of the
£5 a square foot capital value for something that's
quite. You could very easily convert into something that was 300 quid, 350 a foot, kind of really easy sort of things to do. So it's kind of just that.
100 the parade, I think the top floor, the third floor, they put 0 value on it. It's got £5 a foot, £2 a foot, and 0. So you literally got getting space in the centre of a decent spa town for 0. 6% of 0 is 0. So it was remarkable.
Absolutely. Amazing.
But anyway, so we were merrily away doing these sorts of projects, weren't we, in the centre of Leamington and sort of in the Midlands area. And then we tried to try and buy a site, didn't we, opposite our site in Burbage in Leicestershire. we had an occupier, Sainsbury's at the time, wanted to come onto our site, but we couldn't quite fit them on. So we had the same sort of thought process. Well, how do we asset manage these properties? How do we add value? And then we went to the pub company, said, look, can we buy your site off you and put this retailer in there? And they said, well, no, go away, we want £1 million or something. It was 1.25, I think they wanted, as a knee-jerk reaction to a probably worth 250 grand. But anyway, we ended up doing that joint venture, didn't we, on that site. We had a restrictive covenant, which is great, which they couldn't do it themselves. We didn't put Sainsbury's in, if I remember right, we put the Central England Co-op on. We sold it. I think we sold it for about some, yeah. So we did a development on that site in the end. But fundamentally, we kind of took what we'd done here, repurposing buildings. We repurposed that building, and then I remember the property director came to see us, didn't he, from the pubco, and he said, look, this is great, but how are you going to scale this up? How could you do this across all of our sites? So we ended up having this challenge set to us, wasn't it, to say, well, how do we go from one site? I think they gave us 80 sites, then we went to sort of 300 sites, then we went to sort of 4,000 sites. But anyway, we created a process around it, and we thought, well, how do we get this data? How do we aggregate this data? How do we get data around something in Bristol and something in Bury St Edmunds? How do we compare? How do we make these strategic decisions? How do we know who's occupying and who's interested in the location? And we'll kind of go on.
Actually, sorry to cut across you again, but I think we didn't talk the word data back then. I think we said, how do we get local knowledge in those areas rather than data? Actually, how do we know when we're in Bristol what that local knowledge is and what the local values are and kind of what is local knowledge and that kind of stuff, didn't we really?
Local knowledge nationally was sort of the sort of phrase, wasn't it? But anyway, so we kind of did that. But long story short, I think don't want to bore the audience because we want to go into some projects. But we did this review of 4,000 sites, and in 2016, I think they put in their accounts. So these are the PLC's accounts saying that we actually uncovered £100 million worth of latent value, which I think we probably, between us and a few other partners, had realised about 11 million of that. And this was despite the fact they had a national firm of valuers valuing it every 6 months, because they were valuing it for their existing use. And they're going, well, actually, there's an awful lot of latent value that we hadn't even seen that we managed to uncover through this process. And that created a sort of £100 million worth of additional value that we'd uncovered, which subsequently sort of actually coincided with quite a significant spike in sort of planning applications on pubs. And I think that had quite a significant impact on, we did the review, we found this latent value, and then, hey presto, we did some sort of planning applications for them. I think we probably ended up doing quite a few hundred actually applications for whether it's residential, mixed use, or conversions into other things like that. So there was a kind of a review. We did it for a few other pub companies, and that sort of naturally generated quite a significant spike in planning applications that were submitted in relation to pubs. And of course, then things like assets, community value, sort of more and more challenging planning restrictions came on board, and it made it a bit more challenging to do it. But again, coming back to the sort of content around commercial conversions, I think one of our best schemes for that pub company was the site in Farnham, wasn't it? So this was a tapas bar. I think it turned over 3 or 4 times in the last sort of 2 years, really struggling to let it, really struggling to make it work as an existing restaurant / tapas bar. And I think they were making about 25 grand in rent off the site. Upstairs, probably got I did go and have a look around it upstairs, but I think it had a mattress and a sleeping bag in it. So I think it was just like an overspill for the manager or something like that, if they were working late, just to go and stick their head down. Properly hadn't been looked at for a long time, hadn't been used. I think the top floor definitely hadn't been anywhere. Traditional sort of stuff. And I think they were trying to flog it for about 400 grand. I think there's a local buyer was like looking at sort of 400, sort of 500,000 pounds that property. But we did it through our research and through other means. We realised that Cafe Nero had an opportunity in that. Had a requirement in that location. So really, really simple project. At the end of the day, we knew that Cafe Nero wanted to go in. We negotiated a deal with them at 70 grand a year on a 15-year unbroken lease. We knew that they were going in to fit out, had absolutely zero interest in the upper floors, but there was a side access. So all we need to do is fire separate that fire access, fire separate between the ground and the first floor. Obviously, no change of use on that one because it was A4 to A3. And if I remember rightly, 10, 20 grand, we did a capital contribution deal. We said, look, part of your license to alter, you're going to have a landlord's works that you don't have to reinstate, and there's a tenant's works you're going to have to reinstate. And it was 10 grand, I think, something ridiculous like that. And said, well, we'll give you 10 grand, fire separate this, double skin the ceiling, And hey presto, we've got the floors back. At the time, resi values in Farnham were 450, 500 quid a square foot for a flat in a sort of in-town flat in a location like that. So unfortunately, we weren't allowed to do the development of the flat because that wasn't within the client's sort of risk profile. They were happy to do the commercial and sell that, but we took it to sort of 400 grand, 10 grand in as a scheme, and they sold it for 1.5 million. I think the person that bought it, I know the guy quite well. I think he was delighted with it because he probably made another couple of £100,000 of development profit by just converting those and putting the bathrooms in the rest of it from upstairs to that, either to rent them out. So he probably ended up with a sort of, I don't know, £2 million GDV property, fantastic lease downstairs at 70 grand a year to Cafe Nero for 15 years. And he was pleased as punch, no pun intended. But those are the sort of opportunities that there's too much emphasis on the downstairs space and almost disregarding the upstairs. But if you can get this the right way around and you know what the residential values are and it physically works and the rest of it, you can create some phenomenal growth in value with really unbelievable low risk. Really, it's almost a backstop. If you're buying at the value of the building in the first instance, then you've really got an upside only opportunity to do those sorts of schemes.
Absolutely, and the kind of beauty of this scheme is that we never actually touched, didn't we? So we never actually lifted or got anybody to lift a kind of a hammer in vain with it. It literally was kind of all done through paperwork. So it was just the lawyers doing their...
And it was somebody to go and check the work was done to the standard that we expect to do, sort of the signing off process. But it was done by by their contractors and the rest of it. So that was great. So this is all fantastic. This was us working for, I suppose, on the client side. We were trying to ensure that the client didn't lose money on opportunities. And of course, it's then how do you reverse that, engineer that for our current community, which is looking for sites or other developers, investors looking to sort of either with their own properties or find the properties, because a lot of investors don't have an appetite to go and do something with the building. If the building's caused them a problem and they're losing their income, they start to panic and they want to do something, they want to get it sold. Whereas of course, investors, developers who want to do something with the building, that's a great opportunity to repurpose those buildings. So I suppose we've kind of looked at this and just to, I guess, remind ourselves, but there's three ways that you can sort of find these opportunities really in the property industry. One is, I guess, the traditional open market, which we're probably all more familiar with because that's how we sell our houses. Most of us do anyway. You see it on Rightmove, you see it on Zoopla. So you've got the on-market opportunities, which is either a local agent's got a board up on the outside, or a national agent's got a board up on the outside, or joint agency, or it goes into an auction. There tend to be national auctions mainly, but you kind of get some local auctions and things like that. So that's the traditional, you see it on the market. But then you've kind of got this off market, and to us there's two versions of off market. One is what we were probably much more familiar with in the past, was this sort of off market through a set of particulars, through a sort of friendly agent. So you get to know your local market, you get to know your local agents, play a few rounds of golf, go out for a few drinks and stuff like that. And with the view that you probably say, well, if they've gone to see a client that's thinking about selling something, then they might get a set of particulars, they might get a spreadsheet of a tenancy schedule, and they might just sort of ping you a copy to 4 or 5 local investors and developers and say, look, got a client thinking of selling this, do you want to have a look at it? It's not going to the open market, do you want to put some bids in before the open market? And there's some benefits to that, and we'll go through that in a bit. And then there's this sort of newer sort of off-market stuff, and a lot of our community are now using this, which is, well, don't wait for an agent to get an instruction or to get an agent to come into it. Well, perhaps go and proactively find your sites, dig those out yourselves, send a few letters out, sort of canvass those direct to the owners and see whether you can get a relationship with the owner. The letters obviously work because, you can sort of have it. It may not be right for them now, but something might change. There's a lot happening in retail. There's a lot happening in personal circumstances, things like that. So maybe just put a letter across somebody's desk, or send a couple of letters across somebody's desk. You never know what might happen. A letter these days is probably 30, 40p. So once you find opportunities that work, so we kind of have this sort of 3 ways to find sites, but a lot of our community are looking at that sort of version too. So we'll perhaps have a bit more of a look at that. But I think you were just going to ask the audience, actually. It's kind of like we asked the audience.
Yeah, sure. I think we're very interesting just to ask the audience now, which of those 3 things are you finding works best for you? So is it the on market through the auctions and letting boards and this sort of stuff? Is it off market via friendly agents, or is it all, or is it the off market direct to owners that you find you get the best response from? I'll give that a moment just for you to fill that in, just while we wait for that a moment. And what was kind of interesting is that actually I ran a similar thing in my on my LinkedIn profile this week as well, and I'm going to show you the results of that in a second. It's really interesting to see kind of whether there's a difference in today's answers compared with sort of where the people I'm connected on LinkedIn to, whether they have a different place they're getting their things from, which would be interesting. So we've had about 40% of people kind of answer. So let me show you what my LinkedIn friends said. So they said that actually they were focused very much more on off-market via friendly agents. So in essence, less than 10% of people are looking on market now through my LinkedIn profile. You can see it's a reasonable size sort of view. We had 3,500 people look at this. We had sort of 56 votes. Not those 56 votes, sort of less than 10% looking at on market, and then sort of half and half looking at off market, and then off market direct to vendor, in effect, that kind of direct to owners. And actually today we have an interesting result, because actually we have sort of a bigger chunk of sort of a similar size chunk of people looking at direct to vendor, so sort of off market direct to owners, but actually then an even split of what's left of people looking at on market and off market via friendly agents. So I suppose what's kind of interesting then is just to see, Simon, perhaps you could kind of run us through the sort of the benefits of each of these, and kind of what each of them sort of what the pros and cons of each of these. So each one has their own kind of nuances, don't they, in reality?
Yeah. So obviously the on-market stuff is, somebody actually made the positive decision to put a property on the market with an agent. So you wouldn't do that unless you've got a high, propensity to want to sell that building. Obviously, you tend to, on the whole, get open pricing with stuff. So at least you know where you're starting from. So the agent acting for the owner would have managed expectations, whether it's an auction house and stuff like that, put the guide price in or have the reserve price. The positive bit, you don't know, market, the downside, it could be super competitive. You might find that, the more competitive is sort of eroding that profit, isn't it? The more, if you see something, there's more chance of somebody seeing those opportunities that you haven't seen, that the owner perhaps hasn't seen. So the chance of something getting out there becomes quite a lot more challenging for you as a sort of buyer to sort of keep to yourself. Possibly low conversion rates on those, because you can, look at an awful lot of stuff on those. And then I guess if you've got architects or you've got people doing stuff on a open market thing, so you can burn a lot of goodwill with your friendly design team, because you can end up doing an awful lot of abortive work on that basis. But we do, from our point of view, we do have a look at, we do bring on market stuff into the platform. So we have these 400, the largest commercial agents in the marketplace, and we bring that data into Nimbus Maps on a daily basis. So you'll be able to see whether it's on the market, going off the market. We've got a really smart new overlay that's being built at the moment. It's probably going to be out in the next couple of weeks. That is super simple to use and super powerful. So I'm excited to share that. But that's kind of the off market. But obviously the on market stuff. But then the off market, I said we worked for almost a decade in this sort of space, didn't we, Paul? But yeah.
So I'm going to say sort of the on market thing. That sort of the bit that I kind of really get bothered about with that is it's that kind of, if you win an open market bid, there's kind of either, in my head, the building is the building and the opportunity with the building is the opportunity with it. It's kind of the two things that are kind of broadly speaking fixed. And so if you win that bid, the only way you're winning that bid is by dropping your profit level down, saying, well, actually, I'm prepared to take 20% rather than 25% because I think I've got some sort of pre-let, pre-sale, some kind of de-risking, in my mind is going to mean that I can take a lower profit level than that. Or I'm putting lower build cost in. Maybe I've got those wrong. Maybe I'm kind of being particularly aggressive, putting a lower spec in or something like that than I could do otherwise. So ultimately, or I'm taking more risks. So I'm assuming I'm going to get a better scheme out of it than the rest of the marketplace thinks. Otherwise, we should all be putting the same numbers forward, quite frankly, and it should be in the very fine margins around it. So I sort of feel like the on-market stuff, I guess kind of why often in the LinkedIn feed, there's kind of very few people really kind of chasing that, is because that is ultimately what's happening. Is the job of the surveyor in on-market is to get as many people looking at this thing as possible and let the market decide who's prepared to sharpen their pencil the most in order to go and acquire that building, in effect.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So they got the two off-market opportunities or off-market ways too. So we spent a lot of our time in that sort of off-market, sort of friendly agent side of things. And again, it's got a willing seller because the seller's gone to an agent to go and get some some advice or some ideas. It's a little bit passive. You can't really control it. You can only get what the agent will send you, and the agent will only get what clients pretend to sell something for. So it's a bit like you have to sit back and wait. You kind of can't really control your own destiny as much. And again, a lot of it can be off profile. A lot of it's they send the stuff out. It may not be quite right for you. So you're kind of having to sort of segment those and trying to find these opportunities there. And it's not particularly scalable. There's obviously fees to pay, acquisition fees to pay, and things like that. And you're at the mercy of those agents sending you the stuff and making sure that you're relevant for them, and they're going to continue to send the stuff through to you. Yeah, to get that to work, you've got to build those relationships, hasn't you? Relationships, as we know in property, take some time to sort of nurture, to sort of pull together. It's sort of a catch-22. How do I build a relationship with an agent if I haven't done some deals with the agent? So you kind of got to do the deal, and then they'll come back to you and send some more stuff through. So it does take quite a long time to sort of build those relationships over a period of time. And then of course we come to this off-market direct to owner sort of thing. The opportunity is very scalable, isn't it? You can send, if you find the opportunity, you can send more sites out, more letters out. They're always on profile, because if you've chosen the property to go and contact the owner on, you've chosen that property works for you. So it's very much an on profile. You haven't got to worry about that. And I think you can you get time. The beauty of this, if you do a deal with an owner, or you can get that relationship with the owner, you can often control the buying process a bit more as the purchaser rather than the vendor controlling it. So you might be able to do more, I don't know, cleverer deals, like, subject to planning deals, or maybe have somewhere else so you can have a carry in the deal, and you can try and structure a deal that might work for the owner, because not every owner is the same. They may want to get a quick sale. They want to get the most amount of money, and they're prepared to wait a bit longer. The downside is that it could take a lot of time if you didn't have something, like a technology solution. Pricing's a bit uncertain, isn't it? You're approaching them. They haven't sold it. Like, we went to the pub co and said, I'd like to buy that pub off you to put our thing in. £1.25 million as a sort of knee-jerk reaction, just to say, well, that was just a go away type of thing. But they actually did a deal at a much more reasonable price, because you could actually have a conversation with them. And it may take a bit of time to agree it, but I don't know, on the whole, the deal gets done. If it's reasonable, it makes sense, the deal does happen. It might take 2 years, it might take 3 years, it might take 2 or 3 months. You just don't know. But I think if you put that letter across the desk, it tends to hang around. It tends to get filed away next to somebody, just in case you never know. It's that never know sort of stuff. So
I always think that kind of letter is like throwing a lottery ticket away. That's what I always think. It's like if you get a letter in from somebody saying, I'd like to buy a property off you, or I'd like to talk to you about buying a property off you, sort of at worst, you might save an agency fee on it. At kind of best, this might be the person. It only takes one person to pay kind of a high price, or to do a particularly clever deal with you. And so it's always, and you never kind of know when you get the letter through whether that is the person or not. And so I always feel like you can never throw that thing away, because if you do throw it away, you could be throwing that lucky lottery ticket away, which is kind of why they tend to sit in your day book. They tend to sort of just stay there, and then when you kind of decide, we put it in the file with the for the property in effect. And then when you're thinking, well, actually, I might go and sell this building, you kind of tend to make those phone calls first before you go and speak to the local agents, frankly, don't you?
And you've probably got a paper file, because you've got a paper lease, haven't you, and stuff. So you still kind of keep paper files for these sorts of things, because most of them are still transacted, and unless it's in chart, well, even the banks take the leases these days. If it's not there, the actual signed lease comes to you, and you have to keep it in a physical file. So, but anyway, we're sort of focusing quite a lot on on this, but the main thing is, it's like the sort of focus we've got here is the sort of off-market, direct to vendors, direct to owners sort of stuff, because that's the way we're sort of helping people and scale our community. Clearly, 50% of them, certainly from our LinkedIn stuff, or circa 50% of them are using that. So we're here to sort of support people. But maybe, Paul, you could just explain, obviously, Class MA commercial conversions, the 1st of August, huge amounts of planning changes, relaxations to really unlock this. I think a post from Savills yesterday sort of said this is with the vacancy rates in retail, it's now's the time to repurpose these buildings. So sort of these big agencies are jumping on this sort of bandwagon. Obviously, you've got people like John Lewis and Marks and Spencer's, so Lloyd's Bank are talking about coming into this space and creating, so a lot's happening, a lot's shifting. But maybe you could just explain a little bit about to the audience what the Class MA and the changes that have come through.
Yeah, sure. So let's jump into that. So really kind of what's Class MA is all about is this new use Class E. So planning use Class E, which is now kind of an amalgamation of a whole bunch of commercial uses in effect, where you can now apply this PD right Class MA to convert that commercial use, this big suite of new uses, into residential in effect. It's called mercantile to abode. Goodness knows what mercantile means, but that's what it is. So use Class E, as I say, is this kind of suite of use of the old use classes in effect. So in essence, in all intents and purposes, it's A1, A2, and A3. The only bit that's not included in Class E is in effect the last shop in the village. So these kind of small shops, part of A1 was moved into this F2 kind of community use, kind of it's sort of serving that local village in effect. So that doesn't form part of Class E, that forms part of Class F2. But all the other shops across the country end up in this new use Class E. A2 obviously is your financial services, your professional services, your banks, your building sites, all that kind of stuff, your estate agents, all those kind of things. And of course, your cafes and restaurants under Class A3 are now part of this new Class E. We then have the old B1 use classes, so offices, research and development buildings, and light industrial sort of buildings, factories, that sort of stuff. All of those are now part of Class E. So kind of crucially for me, sort of the thing that I think is most interesting about this is that where historically in my head, a shop, an office, and an industrial building are all very different buildings. They have different numbers, different values, different kind of looks and feels to these buildings. In planning terms now, they are all the same thing, and you can freely convert between one and the other because they're now all part of Class E. On top of that, you've also then got things like clinics, health centres, creches, day nurseries, all that kind of stuff that was part of the old D1 use, which is now part of Class E as well. And we've then got just finally some of the old D2 uses where you've got gymnasiums, indoor recreations, indoor recreation kind of facilities that are also part of the new Class E as well. That's a little screenshot from Litchfield's really kind of useful little guide that they provide on their website.
So what we're really sort of saying, so in the past, we could go down the use classes quite easily, sort of A5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I think it's 1,500 square feet. We did lots of that. Obviously, the pub world was great in the initial stages of A4 to A1 for retail, and then they made that more challenging with the ACVs and stuff. But really what we're saying is, and we had to get a planning application to move between those classes an awful lot more. But in effect, they've done a sweeper and say, look, you don't have to get planning permission now to move between those use classes. They're all kind of one of the same. So if you want to divert from any E to E, it's there for you to just kind of do what you please. Yep. So just a massive sweep, a massive funnel of use classes go into one, which gives you incredible amounts of flexibility with those buildings around if there's demand, you can create the supply, rather than if there's demand, I've now got to go through a massive amount of paperwork with the local planning authority to go to get that demand satisfied with my building if it's not the right use class to line the two up. Absolutely.
So, I suppose bring that to life. If you want to take a health clinic or a creche or something and use it as an office, you can do that now under Class E with no change of use. It's just a thing you can go and do. You can just put desks, full-size desks in place, the little tiny desks that little kids sit in the creches. You can just do that and get on with it, frankly. So that's the new use Class E. Now, as I said, Class MA then, the PD right, applies to that big use Class E in effect, to convert that to residential. So
1st of September, Class E came out and they aggregated this, and then the Class MA is mercantile to abode. Mercantile, thanks Carol, means commercial. So commercial to abode, house, residential. So 1st of September, they managed a massive wash up of the commercial use classes. Now there's this new commercial to to residential abode, isn't it? Which was the 1st of August. That's right, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I hadn't seen that in the chat. Thank you, Carol. That's used to be. I say no idea what mercantile means. We now know. So thank you, Carol. That's brilliant. So so that's kind of what it's all about. But of course, there are some constraints. There are some kind of things you have to kind of tick off as part of that in order to get this, to apply this new PD right. And those things that you've got to look at are these. So the building size itself for this commercial space must be a maximum of 1,500 square meters there. So 16,000 square feet. The old PD rights were actually 1,500 square feet, I believe. So kind of a real fraction of the size of what these new buildings are. 16,000 square foot building, that's quite a big building. Like 30 odd flats you convert that to, quite a big old lump. You can't do it. So you can't apply this new Class MA mercantile to abode, commercial to abode in Article 2.3 land areas, if you like. So that's areas of natural beauty, special protection areas, the Broads, national parks, World Heritage sites. You can't do it in SSSI, so site special scientific interest. You can't do it in safety hazard zones. You can't do it in military explosive areas, and you can't do it crucially to listed buildings either. To be able to apply the PD rights for Class MA, the building also needs to have been empty for 3 months. So when you kind of finally submit your prior approval, if you like, you need to be saying, well, the building has been empty, it's been vacated on this date, and it's now been empty for 3 months in order for that to apply. And crucially, the building needs to be used as one of those Class E uses for a minimum of the last 2 years, in effect. So it's been in that use for 2 years in order for that to apply.
So Class E's not been around though, but it's the previous use.
Yeah. So you could have an A2 estate agents or whatever that's been run for the last 3 years as an estate agents, and that kind of old A2 use would qualify as what would have been Class E back then, even though it wasn't a thing back then. But in effect, it's being used as one of those Class E uses for that time, in effect.
Okay, so what we then say, so I guess the way our minds work and our data team minds work, isn't it? I guess we say, look, you've got access to this sort of information on 30 million properties or thereabouts, and so, well, that's data, that's data, that's data, that's data. So in effect, what do? We went to the guys in the office and said, look, how do we translate these constraints and these opportunities out of the data sets, and what have we done? Yeah,
sure. So what we did with the data science team is that, in effect, we filtered for those Class E commercial properties, in effect. So we said, right, what are all the Class E properties across England and Wales? And then obviously, if it doesn't apply to buildings that are over 1,500 square meters, then obviously exclude them because it won't apply to them. So let's remove those. Crucially, then, we've also applied this thing called applying a residential feel to it. So I'm a big believer that the schemes, that just because you can do a scheme doesn't mean to say you should do a scheme. And actually having the right building in the right place with a marketplace ready for what you're building in that marketplace is really important to make sure your exit is as you expect it to be. You're selling for the price you're expecting to. There's a really good example of this in Warwick, actually, where there's kind of industrial area where one of the buildings in the middle of it is being converted into 6 new luxury apartments. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like you've got kind of an old kind of car garage, and then you've got this old mill that's being converted into flats, and then you've got another, like a bed factory, something next door to it, and it's kind of like it just doesn't look or feel like a sort of a nice new place.
It's the wrong thing. Yeah, that's a good, it's a good point. You don't want to just stick something there because you can, because it just looks out of keeping, and it's going to affect the overall value anyway, isn't it? Because it just stands out. You're going to struggle
to sell it, won't you? Because it's kind of all of that, during the day, working from home, and you've got car tires being changed, and that's.
I think that, it's a bit, controversially in some respect, that people want to protect sort of the commercial areas. That's fine. I think it's going to happen more on the tertiary areas, isn't it? I think my view is that you're going to sort of have a constraining or narrowing down of some of the central business districts or the sort of areas, and the tertiary buildings on the outskirts will get converted. Those those occupiers in the tertiary areas will probably move into the secondary, and the secondary might move into the primary. So you hope that there's a natural, I suppose, consolidation inside the town centres, and then the peripheral stuff will get converted into residential. And then that creates vitality and creates people coming into the towns, which has got a double benefit, because that's people to then use what the retail that's left over. So it's just a sort of natural tidying up almost of some tertiary edge of towns, rather than edge of settlement, but edge of sort of town centres.
Yeah. And in reality, that's kind of where the numbers stack up anyway. But in essence, what we've done with this is that it's making sure that there's kind of a residential feel to it, in effect, so that when you're converting this building, there is sort of a sensible amount of residential around it. You're not trying to convert an office building in the middle of an office park that's on the edge of the, it's like those are the things that aren't gonna fly. So crucially, we've overlaid that onto it as well. Then of course we've excluded the stuff that doesn't apply. So we've excluded anything in Article 2.3. We've excluded anything that's scheduled monuments. We've excluded listed buildings. And actually we've excluded stuff that's in flood zones 2 and 3 as well. So flood zones 2 and 3 aren't precluded from the use itself. So the Class MA, the Class MA PD, but actually you have to then file your or kind of submit your flood risk assessment as part of it, and actually just makes life difficult for you. So we've taken a view to remove that out of the list as well, so that you've got what is a really deliverable list of properties that then you can convert, that should then have that nice feel of it's sympathetic to its neighbours, it's sympathetic in terms of the marketplace that it's going into. So the schemes that you're putting forward should be really quite
clever.
Smart.
It's actually sort of clever algorithm that the team sort of overlaid onto all of this to say, yeah, how do we, what's the percentage, and is it a residential feel before you start thinking about converting into residential? Because otherwise,
absolutely. And those are the kind of key things. It's kind of interesting because we sort of talk a lot about some of the changes that came in PD rights, so things like minimum space standards, and obviously now you have to prove natural light and this sort of stuff. And kind of what's kind of interesting really for me is that natural light into a flat is quite important, because when you go and show someone around to try and sell them this flat or let it to them, they want to see some natural light. It's like, I don't want to live in a box with no windows. It's like, and so whilst, and sort of minimum space standards, you kind of want it to be big enough to be able to fit your double bed in it and have enough space to sort of to live in it. So I kind of find it really interesting that sort of those things that are now part of the new PD rights that weren't part of them before, it's just what makes the good scheme, and it's just what makes.
I think there's a lot of scaremongering saying that people are going to build substandard properties, but I mean, our experience, people still want to build quality stuff. They want to leave a legacy, don't they? They want to, especially the owners as well. And you don't want to build cut corners, because it comes back to, it just affects your reputation, doesn't it?
My overwhelming feeling of it is that it's not in your interest to do it. Frankly, it's not in your interest to try and build stuff that isn't kind of nice. You want to get in and get out on a development. You want to kind of get in and let it, or get in and sell it. It's kind of, you don't want to kind of be stuck hanging around with finance costs of empty buildings. That's kind of the key thing. And sort of setting that up right is kind of the key.
If you buy it right, you can make enough money to do a good scheme. So if you're not overpaying for it,
you buy right, make money, don't you? It's kind of same old cliche, frankly.
So what did this produce then, Paul, off the back of this?
Absolutely. So this has given us a whopping 83,382 properties that have been found, specifically 382. A total floor area of 178 million square feet that this new Class MA can be applied to, with a current net worth of in the sort of region of about 35 billion pounds. This is information that we create obviously here at Nimbus. That information was then run as part of an article in Property Week. Yes, Property Week sort of got very excited about it and ran that in kind of one of the recent editions of that. What that means then, in effect, we sort of break that down to what do these schemes look like. Well, ultimately, what we have is sort of the entire list is about a GDV about 80 billion in terms of all of those schemes aggregated together. Kind of what's the total sales price of all of those properties? They can be bought for about 35 billion. The construction cost to convert from mercantile, the new Class A, into residential will be about 18 billion, just over 18.7. And then a profit level that's left over off the back of that of 27 billion in terms of a return on costs. And what that means then, given there's 83,000 of these properties, that actually what you have is this. So you have a GDV of just under £1 million. You have a purchase price of 420,000 and a construction cost of about £250,000, which then leaves you with a profit of just over 325,000 if so that 50% return on cost. So that's, as that little pop-up shows you that I couldn't get rid of, is kind of absolutely ideal for SME developer and the local investor developers.
Yeah.
That,
so if it was one big estate, it'd be 83,000 properties. You know, a bit like our pub stuff of 40,000, and there's an opportunity to unlock, 27 billion pounds worth of value, isn't it? The sort of latent value once you put the construction costs into that. So it's exactly the same as like the 4,000 pubs we found, sort of 100 million pounds of latent value. Obviously they were trading, some of those were trading pretty well. This is doing the similar sorts of calculation and sort of saying, well, what does that mean on an individual basis? And the GDV has been calculated on that specific site. So it's a residential area in that specific location. The construction costs have been assumed based on that location. So if it's in London, it's one price. If it's in Bristol, it's in North. So we've changed that, and that's on a site-by-site basis. But on average, and we've basically cut out all those that don't make a 25% profit margin as well. So this is not like, oh yeah, you might do a development project and it's £1 million and it's going to make you
That's a good point. Actually, the one bit we haven't put on that slide, isn't it, is that across all of this, that hurdle rate of 25% return on cost has been kind of baked into it in effect. So that
we've cut all that out. So yeah. So the stuff that doesn't work is not part of that identification process in effect. So it's not 83,000 properties this applies to for Class MA. It's when you cut it down, those are in a residential area, those that make 25% profit, those that make enough GDV, those that work right size. Of all of those options through the data, there's 83,000. So you could be a busy fool looking for everything, but in effect, the data's cut it down to those projects. Okay.
Absolutely. It's viability in planning terms and viability financially, frankly. It's kind of the two of those two things need to work. Otherwise, you've got no scheme. If you can't get planning for it, it doesn't stack up. You're wasting your time, frankly. And so it's just kind of, I suppose the key to that is sort of cutting that out at the start. So the stuff that clearly isn't going to work because it's got planning constraints that don't work or doesn't stack up financially, kind of that stuff is just excluded and removed out the way. So you just don't spend your time on it, which is kind of the sort of the main thrust of all this, frankly.
Well, why don't we see if we can put this into practice then?
Yeah.
Why don't we let's do this new thing, deal in 90 seconds.
I knew you were going to say that. So this is where I get a bit hot under the collar. So we have this new thing at Nimbus, which is a deal in 90 seconds. So we're going to show you on Nimbus now, hopefully me finding a deal in 90 seconds. This is a bit like the kind of the Charles Magician kind of trick in effect, that is me finding something in 90 seconds that then we believe is a deal. So what I would like to do is to make it like that kind of that Charles Magician, I meant to say. What I'd like to do is to open up the chat, and I'd like you to pop a location into the chat.
There.
Sheffield, Barnet. Well, this is the question, isn't it? So I had tried this yesterday with Dan Taylor, and he wanted 10 million GDV. So I had to kind of be a bit selective out the back of this. But I think we should go. Where do you want to go, Simon? You tell me where you want to go.
I don't mind. You've got Sheffield, Watford, Birmingham, Nottingham, Enfield.
We've got lots, haven't we? We've got lots. Let's just make a decision. Well, let's go for the first one. Let's go for Jordan. Let's go for Sheffield. So Sheffield is a worry for me. So this is Nimbus Maps Elite, of course. Now Sheffield is a slight challenge. I'm going to just explain why Sheffield is a challenge for me. Let me just show you.
Put the timer on, but we've got to find a deal in 90
No, we've got to explain what's happening first. I haven't started searching yet, so just you can start the timer when I say that's okay. There's too many chiefs in this webinar. We just got to be careful with this. So in effect, the reason why I'm slightly nervous that I've been given a challenge, I've given 90 seconds, which I haven't started yet, just for the record. The reason I'm worried about that is that when we go into the market section here, and we're looking at commercial conversions, we've got to have sales values that are high enough in order for us to be able to pay for a conversion cost and buy the building that's there at ideally somewhere north of the existing use value. So if we can pay more than the existing use value, so more than the building's worth as it stands, if I can pay more than that, then I can start to say to you as an owner, well, I tell you what, I'm not going to buy it now. I'm going to buy it once I get my planning consent on it, but I'm going to pay a bit more than it's worth. And so therefore, you and I are going to enter the joint venture together to go and do this deal, which means that then I get to de-risk my opportunity. I don't pay anything out. I pay perhaps a small deposit, but I don't pay anything out until I've got the consent for the scheme that I want to go and deliver, which I know makes money. Now, the challenge I've got with of
we
course,
just explain
Sheffield.
what we're seeing here then, Paul. So this is
Exactly the point, yeah.
This is the
So
residential values rates.
This is showing me,
yeah.
So there's too many chiefs on this webinar. Hang on.
Well,
so in essence, what this is showing me is that if we think new build costs across a lot of the country, sort of pre-COVID, is about 150 a foot, something like that, then of course this is showing me the average sales prices of residential properties in this area across Sheffield, and it's grouped by neighbourhood boundaries. So these kind of squiggly white lines, showing these interesting parts of town. Those are neighbourhood boundaries. Those are neighbourhoods within Sheffield, which means that if I've got a new build value of 150 for residential properties, and I'm going to be converting, so typically all the stuff that we've had in terms of QS advice we've had, usually you come out at sort of 2/3, 3/4 of new build cost. Then in reality, I'm looking at 100, 110 pounds a foot, something like that as a conversion cost across Sheffield. And there's big swathes of Sheffield that aren't even at that level in terms of sales prices just to cover the conversion costs. And of course, if they're not above that level, I want 25% return on cost for the profit and the effort that I'm putting into this, which means that there's not anything left over to then be able to buy buildings to convert them. I've got to pay for the building, then I've got to convert it, and then I've got to sell it at 25% above that number in order for me to get the sales price, to get the scheme to stack up in effect. So I'm slightly nervous. So let's see. I still feel a little bit confident.
Somebody said that 90 seconds are running out, but we did say that we were going to let you have it. So you're going to go and find a conversion site.
Let's start it. Ready? Class MA.
Oh, wait. I need to put the timer on. Okay, I'll let you get going.
It started. So what have we got here? We have a shop down there, which is 180 quid a foot sales value, 1.6 million, 80 quid a foot conversion cost, 350 and 8%. Maybe not. Let's have a little look. Let's just see what that looks like. Quick. You timing me, Simon?
Yeah. You've got loads of time. Don't worry.
Well, in fact, that looks all right, actually, doesn't it? That does look all right to me, actually. That does look
like they're converting next door, isn't it? To
8,500 feet. I think I've done it. I think it's easy. Look, here we go. So here we go. Let's have a little look at this then. Ta-da! What was that? How long was that?
34 minutes, 34 seconds,
34 minutes.
No, exactly.
Oh dear. Okay. So what have we found? We have found here that this property is, in effect, I mean, it's just like the old pet shop, isn't it? It's one of these sort of funny retail units where you have, in essence, a ground floor that's kind of actually quite low valued, actually, and then office space above it, which is remarkably second-hand in effect. So it's very poor space, and you can sort of see 1,300 square feet of office space at first floor there, which has got a rate system of about £1,000, so kind of 75p a foot. So the rate assessment is not the rent, but it's what the district valuer thought the rent was back in 2015. So it's 75p. It's £1 worth of rent.
£1 a square foot rent. I mean, we're talking ridiculously low values, isn't it?
It's next to nothing, exactly. Value, and so in essence, what it's saying then is that not only is that the case, but of course this is all residential to the side. So it's sort of picking out the fact there's sort of residential properties. It looks like a bit of airspace going on. Maybe that's the old Class ZA going on top of the building next door in effect. But in essence, it's saying, well, there's a retail unit on the ground floor, 2 floors of flats on top of it. I mean, to be fair, you've probably got a airspace opportunity as well, like this on the side there as well. The overall value of this building is the kind of the interesting thing. I'm just going to bring that. Just want to do this again. Let's just jump back out and just slide this out. So in essence, what Nimbus has calculated for us is that the building is 9,000 square feet in total. That 9,000 square feet is sort of saying the average rate system was £2.6. So it's saying, well, actually the average rental level for that building is about 350 a foot. So if you were to go and rent that building, it's saying you're going to pay 35 grand to rent the entire building as it currently stands. It's saying that based on Sheffield, conversion costs for about 80 quid a foot for that building. And in reality, what that means is that you may replace the windows, but maybe not. You're probably not replacing the roof. You're perhaps partitioning out some of those first floor areas to create the flats and this sort of stuff, but nothing kind of sort of rewiring, replumbing, and this kind of stuff. Which means that in reality, the building, if it's got a 35 grand rental level, then it's worth sort of 350 as a building, because it's not a particularly good building or a particularly good use in that particular location, which means then there's £500,000 worth of profit. You spend 700 grand converting it, here's £1 million, there's £500,000 worth of profit in it, frankly. So kind of really, really quick ways to go and do that. What we then said is that the way that we make this work is you add that property to workflow like this, you click save. The workflow is this kind of section here that sort of shows you all the properties that you found in effect. This is how we then do the letter campaigning to get into that sort of second part of off market, where we get all the benefits of having more time to do these deals, to really kind of then pay a bit more on the site, maybe to get the owner to buy into doing the deal with us rather than perhaps shove it on the open market and this sort of stuff. It gives us time, it gives us scope to go and get our sort of ducks in a line, if you like. And the way this then works is that we can save all our properties into this. We can kind of move them all around and make sure we kind of got everything organized. We know who's coming back and who we're kind of working with and who we're not, and this sort of stuff. But then crucially, we can just download that into Excel. And when we do that, it then has these nice, neat columns in it that say, well, this is the owner, this is their address, line 1, 2, 3, 4. And we just go and mail merge to them, or indeed just like stamp or doc mail or something to go and get those letters out. So it's really, really simple to go and find opportunities and then contact the owners, which in effect, what we then know is those buildings are on profile because we're looking to do a commercial conversion, we're looking to do a class MA or something like that. We know then that those kind of planning headlines have been hit. We know that the scheme should stack up financially. And then from there, we've then got on-profile leads that are truly scalable. So even in a place like Sheffield, where I'm sort of slightly nervous about the sort of number of opportunities, actually you can see there are still quite a few opportunities that are around. And so you sort of got these various sort of returns that are being shown in the map, in effect, that you can go and target, in effect. Some of the kind of cool stuff that is also really useful, actually, is sort of in that market section that I was talking about a moment ago, which is sort of understanding, well, which buildings are on the market. So if I've got this kind of quasi office space upstairs, well, where is there other office space that I can go and see and sort of see, well, who are the people that are letting these things. So here we've got Deering House around the corner, literally over the road, that's on the market with these commercial property partners or whatever. And of course,
smarter. I'd say that's a lot smarter. Look at that.
I mean, look at it. Yeah, it's sort of way better. This is kind of why, you know, 15 quid a foot. It's a very smart office building.
I'll say office accommodation compared to the sort of class,
absolutely,
B and C tertiary stuff that you're looking at there. So that gives you the headline details at 15 quid a foot.
Absolutely,
it's phenomenally powerful, isn't it? To sort of see offices to compare with that. Am I being realistic? I
guess one of the other things that perhaps is also interesting is that if you converted the shop to office, you know, you've probably got a slightly lower conversion cost, actually, and maybe that's actually a better use, is you buy it as the shop as it is based off those sorts of numbers, and you re-let it as an office space. You know, you give it this finish, which is kind of M&E, isn't it? It's kind of you want open plan office space, and you re-let it as this. If it's £15 a foot leasehold, it's like, well, that may be worth more than the thing. If you can let it, there's a question, kind of, and the question for that house.
You know, you've got the data there to decide. Not everything has to go to residential. You can have a mixed-use scheme, isn't it? So, like we did cafe plus that. You know, you want to see what are all those various options. So, what's going on in the marketplace? What is the, you know, and okay, who do I talk to? Who do I talk to in Sheffield about offices? Well, clearly those guys have got offices on the market.
Absolutely.
Rob Darrington, I'd go and give him pick up the phone. His telephone is there, isn't it? Or Max Pickering. So, you know, what's that? There's the other one up the road, isn't there? There's another office just above it. What was that one saying there then, Paul?
Well, there's lots of them actually. There's kind of all these. So
I was thinking about near the subject.
This one here, yeah, 12 to 17.
12 to 17. So
yeah, but again, it looks pretty good stuff again, isn't it? I mean, it's quite trendy stuff, isn't it?
WeWorky sort of stuff. They're trying to create a little bit. Of, it's
trendy stuff, isn't it?
Well, it's hairdressers, isn't it? Really. So
yeah. Some of the central stuff's coming more. That's £10 a foot. I mean, that's kind of more the kind of thing, isn't it? Sort of grotty space, 10 quid a foot. Maybe you can get more out of it. It's not that bad, actually, is it? It's not that bad.
Well, they're doing it up there, aren't they, as well?
Recently refurbished, yeah.
Nearly refurbished, isn't it?
Refurbished, yeah.
Same guy again. So if I refurbish it, well, it's the same guy, isn't it? So if I refurbish it, what do I get? If I buy this, you know, in this current state, what's it worth? You know, and it's kind of you're starting to build up those appraisals, those options, and those ideas and those opportunities, aren't you? To, you know, super powerful to be able to see that.
Absolutely, and this is kind of, I mean, this is also kind of interesting in many ways, because what you can then do with this is is drop into this thing called the planning export that we have here at Nimbus. And actually, if I do something very simple with this, what this is doing, this is going off and it's looking across Sheffield's council, in effect, for any planning applications mentioning the word office. I've got a button down here, I'm going to use that instead, actually. So in effect, this is looking for all of the in effect, the things that might kind of bring us back offices in effect, and then removing some of the clutter. So this is kind of show it if it shows any of these keywords, and remove anything that has kind of things that would mean it's not kind of relevant to us. So if I just export this for a minute, because what this is going to show me, it's going to show me all the planning applications across Sheffield that mention an office use in effect. And what's kind of interesting with that is we can then look and say, well, actually, is there anything else happening across Sheffield? Because what I guess might be the case.
Well, might be stuff like that, like the one in Coventry that.
Well, what I was thinking is there kind of an HMO marketplace? So this is the HMO over. So there's clearly HMOs around this area. So my guess is when we start seeing this, is there a conversion of office to student? Is there a conversion office to residential, this sort of stuff? And actually what we'll see then.
Lifting up the bonnet to what's happening in the area, of anything to change of use from offices to, well, poker training. So that's an interesting one. And
yes, quite. So if we just do, let me just have a little play with this for a minute, because this might be kind of useful just to kind of get a feel for what's going on in Sheffield. In fact, so this is giving us a list of all of those planning applications that mention
change of use of first floor offices use class E now. So they're obviously bringing that use class E into that planning application process.
So that's going to Resi, of course, you know, partial demolition, blah, 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 office to dwelling, cosmetic treatment rooms, basement to dwelling, poker training academy. Yeah, that's perhaps not a usual use we're expecting to see.
These are all waiting decision, aren't they? So this is, so one's granted condition, isn't it, to rear dwelling house. So you can start to see what's happening, what's being refused. You know, there's a closer there, but you can order it by that, can't you? And sort of say what's happening.
Yeah, sure. What I was thinking would be kind of useful would be to sort of have a little play with this and sort of you can kind of read through all of this. But of course, what we are finding is there's plenty of kind of residential applications that are going in effect. And then what's kind of interesting then is that as you kind of look across on this, you'll find sort of details of who those people are that are kind of converting offices to residential. This is kind of a list of people that own those buildings. So there's a planning application on the left and there's the owner's details in the middle in effect. And on the far right, what it does is it then tells you, well, who are the people, who are the agents that they're using to do those residential conversions in effect. So who are the sort of the local people across sort of Sheffield that are doing those office to residential conversions, because that's how we can then get a decent design team that sits behind all of this. Kind of who's the right.
So you've kind of got, you know, so you put the commercial overlay to say who's the local movers and shakers on renting office space, retail space, and the rest of it. I put that overlay on. Planning export, look for the word offices to something or other, see what's going on, and you get the applicant and the agent's details, and then you've kind of got the movers and shakers of who the planning applications, because we still believe that local, obviously, information about values, but also local information from local agents, planning consultants and stuff like that, or architects that can tell you what's the chances of something. So I think that sort of local, kind of a local knowledge for planning, local knowledge for values, two different ways to, you know, two different solutions to get that knowledge base.
Absolutely. And then kind of the other thing that's perhaps interesting with this is that you can then also filter by the date the property was bought. So if you're looking for, you know, you're going to go and buy an office building, there's kind of a number of reasons that you're kind of interested in this file, I suppose, being blunt. And the reason I filtered that for the last 3 years of the property having traded hands at that time is that what that means is that here's a list of all the people that are buying buildings where they're then converting either their building offices on those sites or they're converting offices into something else. And of course, what they're doing on those sites is shown in this thing here, in effect. So reserve maps application for office building to whatever in effect.
Yeah.
And it's sort of telling you what they're doing with those things. So if you're going to go and buy an office building and you want to get a consent on it and flip it and sell it to somebody, then those people there will kind of understand the office market in that town, and they'll kind of be quite happy to probably talk about that. If you want to go and get some finance for a scheme because you've kind of run out of your own money, or most developers kind of end up with sort of spending all their money, and then kind of other bigger schemes will kind of need to raise some more. And of course, those people there will understand that office market too. So actually kind of can be a really good place to go to for all of that. And it's also kind of giving you, well, who are those local developers? What are they doing to offices? First off, are they converting to residential? It seems like there's quite a bit of that going on. But equally, then, who are they using as their architects? So who are the local developers using as their design team? But then, if I'm going to do a scheme in that location, there's a list of people there that those local developers think are the right people and are trusting their schemes to go forward with these people here in effect. So there's kind of your list of people to go and interview as you're sort of working out who the right design team is for that building, of course.
Okay, I think we'll probably need to. I think that's. I think we've sort of had quite a lot of that on the platform. Is there anything else you want to show, or do we need to kind of go into Q&As now a little bit more and perhaps get some people?
Yeah, no, I think well, we try to sort of move into sort of Nimbus story time, so trying to explain the story behind the building as part of it and sort of understand what's going on around it and sort of dig into the owner and this sort of stuff. So I think we've kind of done that. I think there's kind of a number of things you could do with that building and a number of ways in which that, and of course it in 34 seconds rather than 90. So 34 minutes according to my brother, but 34 seconds.
You can find the opportunities, and then obviously there's a lot of due diligence around that. So it's the finding the sites, almost an instant finding within 30 seconds. And then it's like the assessment bit, and there's all that toolkit of assessing what it is. And it was quite interesting, you know, then the sort of connecting with the owner, or the agent acting for the owner, or the agent may put a planning application in. So there's lots of different ways to approach that owner if you think you've found a site that assesses it, makes a lot of sense to you, doesn't it, and things like that. So that's
absolutely amazing. So the key thing next, so in terms of that Class MA strategy that I use, we've got a new thing actually today. So what we've got, so there's a commercials bundle which is happening at the moment. There's a sale that's on here at Nimbus. We have a commercials bundle. That bundle includes, in effect, the new Class ZA, which is taking the old B1 uses and putting 2 stories of flats, knocking them down, rebuilding those flats with 2 stories on top. So strategy number 1 is included in that bundle, which is that Class ZA PD rights. Strategy 4, which is the Class G shop developers, is included within it as well. Strategy 5 is included, which is the low value commercial buildings and residential areas. And crucially, strategy number 9, which is the one I've just demonstrated, that the Class MA PD rights strategy.
There's 4 strategies that, so because the Class MA is new this month, we've kind of done an introductory offer to get people, you know, give them the sort of opportunity to do it for this month only. So that's kind of a sort of introductory offer for August, isn't it? That sort of bundle that goes.
Yeah, around that 27th of August.
So those 4 would normally be 2,400. We're getting all 4 for that sort of money. That includes a lot of training and ongoing one-on-one support with the customer success team. Your deals clinics where you can bring projects to either you, me, or Andrew, mainly you doing those sort of things. So there's it's not just here it is and you left your own device. You can bring it. You've got loads of support. I think the other thing was just to say that we've also realized that we're so positive or confident. If Paul can find a site in 90 seconds, we will get you a project or projects within 90 days. So we've basically said that we're so positive after those 4 bundles. If you want to find commercial development opportunity conversions, either for yourself or if you're an agent for clients that you know want these sorts of projects, then there's kind of this sort of guarantee that we put in. So that's another thing that's just sort of put to one side. So if you'd rather pay a little bit more, but guarantee that you'll find a site within those 90 days, given that Paul's found one in 47 seconds. Then
34, actually, 34, thank you. 34.
If you want to do that, then we've got this sort of slightly higher price, but if you don't find it, you can have your money back subject to you using it, a few terms and conditions. So there's a sort of, if it doesn't work for you, you can have your money back. So there's a couple of options there, which are only available, aren't they, for August, because it's also new and we want to get it to that marketplace straight away.
Absolutely. And that includes, so basically includes those 4 strategies. So Class ZA, Class G, Class MA, and indeed the general commercial buildings and residential areas. Gives you one-to-one support team from our, one-to-one support from our customer success team, which means you're going to make sure you're successful. And of course, those weekly deal clinics where you can bring your sites and your issues to myself, to Simon, or indeed Andrew too. If anyone would like to have a chat to one of our team about that bundle, if you open up the chat and just comment yes into the chat, that will then get them to get in touch with you after the webinar. What we're going to do next is we're going to jump into a live Q&A. So if anybody would like to ask a question or for us to answer anything particularly live, then what I'd like to do is to open up the control panel on your Zoom account, and there should be a raise hand button on there. We've got a number of questions in the Q&A, so we can go to that. Milton's popped his hand up, so let's just jump in and see if we can get Milton to talk. See if we can unmute you, Milton. Hi, Milton.
Hi, Milton. You okay?
I'm good, and you?
You're very quiet, actually. Struggling to hear you.
You don't hear me? Let me put my phone.
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know what happens. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, my question is what I put in the Q&A in written, but anyway, I know that you guys work with Ranjan Bhattacharya,
Sure.
and I'm on his course,
Yep.
and he advises that when working the potential sales price for the newly reconverted residential, if the unit is above a shop or a commercial unit, we should drop the price 10 to 15%. I see on your MA strategy that you do the opposite. There is a sales price, the average sales price, and you put the price up because of a new build. So
Yeah, sure.
Where should I go?
Yeah. So my overwhelming feeling with this is that the average sale price that we're displaying is the average sale price of all of the sales across that big wide area. So it's kind of, it draws a whole line around the whole neighborhood in effect, and it averages everything. So in the average that we're presenting, it shows the good, the bad, and the indifferent in effect. So it shows those houses with the avocado bathroom suites right the way through to the new build properties that are there. So my guess with what Ranjan is saying is that you take sort of the three best kind of comparables that you've got, so the three highest prices, average those three, and then knock off 10% for that, because actually you're above a shop rather than having a standard house or a standard block of flats that is kind of a single residential kind of entity in effect. So our average is a lower price because it includes everything from sort of top to bottom of everything that's ever sold. Not everything ever sold, but kind of over the last 18 months in effect. And then we're inflating that to take it to kind of, I think the same number actually is what Ranjan's saying, just we're starting at an average of everything. And he's saying, well, take your three comparables and then average those three and then discount them down because you're above a shop rather than being, a new build house on a new build greenfield piece of land in the, a new build house on the, a little estate of 10 or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of. One further question. So do you make any difference if the MA conversion you are estimating is above a commercial unit, or it's a full new build including the ground floor? Because
yeah, so the Class MA strategy assumes that you're converting the whole building, so that you're doing a complete conversion of the ground floor as well as the upper floors. There's kind of an interesting question with that, because when you kind of look at some of this stuff, you sort of say, well, actually, if it's a retail unit, then the Zone A rents at the front are usually so high that that bit doesn't really stack up to convert. And so what the calculation in effect is saying, that in the calculation for this, it's saying the whole building converts to residential, off you go, flats on the ground floor, first floor, second floor, whatever, kind of the whole thing goes. If, on the other hand, so that you can kind of do that under the Class MA PD rights, of course, but if that sort of front part of the for the Zone A rent is particularly high, then you might sort of carve off, the front's 20 feet into a little kiosk, or perhaps the front 40 feet, depending on kind of just how high those Zone A rents are. But of course, what that's going to do is going to have a very low conversion cost. It's going to have a higher value anyway, which means you're going to kind of, whilst you might then discount the upper parts for that, because it's then above a commercial unit rather than being a complete residential property, you've made that money back because you've got a higher value in the ground floor, because you've got the sort of the higher Zone A rents on the ground floor at the front in effect. So you've got the kind of the choice. You're running those two appraisals side by side in effect, saying which one's which one's more viable. Once I've got a willing seller, I know the scheme should stack up just on the basis of a complete conversion. If I then broke it up into smaller parts, then do I make more money out of it? You sort of
But
run through appraisals.
you're working on the assumption that we're going to break the ground floor and use the rear part for residential. So only keeping the zone A for renting. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's your kind of your option B in effect. So option A is what the calculation is running on is saying the whole building. If option B, which keeps the front half, in zone A, zone B or whatever, is more viable, then you can do that too. But it's sort of setting the benchmark of the whole building gets converted.
So basically, the bottom line question is, should I make any allowances on your projected sales price depending on the situation?
No. Once you get owners interested, I'd think about, is there other ways of doing it, like we looked at in Sheffield? Is there a office to office conversion? Is there something like that might make more, just refurbish the office? I'd look at those things, but the sort of the base case, the baseline kind of, does it stack up or not, is yes, it does to residential.
Okay,
so it's a baseline position, isn't it? Is what putting that sort of
lots of developments you run, you have kind of various different options, and you're sort of trying to work out, well, based on the return and the risk for each one of them, which one is the one I want to go for. And in many ways, kind of one of the things we've been sort of talking quite a lot about over sort of through lockdown and through, kind of what is COVID and kind of how has that affected things and where's the world going to and all this sort of stuff. Actually, having multiple exits is a really kind of useful thing, because it means I could let it for student, I can with HMOs or whatever, or I can sell it off as flats, or I can rent it out as flats, or I can convert it to house or whatever. And actually having those 3 or 4 different options is really useful, I think.
And with that Warwick Street project, we sold the ground floor and a ground lease, and then sold the freehold to the residential upstairs, and we sold the back off as things. So we actually sold the shop on a 125-year ground lease. So it just gives you flexibility and, I guess, some fluid sort of options for people to be an owner occupier of a building and carve it up. So
that's what it's where you get the best return, isn't it? It's like if the ground floor, I think in the case of Warwick Street, Simon's talking about, the rental, the yield we're going to get out of it was quite low, because it was the rent was this, and the value kind of just to sell the ground floor lock-up shop was kind of worth sort of such a lot more, and the yield was so low, we thought, well, kind of better off just selling it and putting money in something else. So we did, and kind of if the marketplace is saying that to you at the time, you just do that, don't you? So hence the
again, it's like, who do you talk to in Sheffield? It's going back to that sort of commercial overlay is helpful, isn't it? So
sure.
Cool. Okay. Is that helpful, Milton?
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. I've closed the things. We've got Romano wants to ask a question. Let's see if we can get Romano up. Let me see if I can ask you to unmute Romano.
You might have closed Milton off, Paul, as well.
Romano's not. Hi, Romano, we're trying to get hold of you. Trying to unmute you, Romano, if we can. Let's try Brad at the same time. Trying to unmute you, Brad. Hi, Brad. How you doing?
Hi, guys. I'm all right. Yourselves?
Yes, very well. Thank you. Very well.
I had a couple of questions, actually. Just wanted to ask you, Simon, when you were talking about the Cafe Nero case study the first time around, how did you go about, if you wanted to get a pre-let before you start on a particular site, how do you go about how do you get to one like Cafe Nero, Tesco, Subway? Do they have special?
So we work closely with a company called the Requirements List. So I know you've had a look at that. So I think it's just www.requirementslist.co.uk, set up by Adam Crooks, that we've known for a long time. So we used to have quite a good relationship with the end users ourselves, because we had quite a lot of control over the pub market. But he in effect did what we did at the back end of our systems, which was aggregating the requirements and keeping them live and stuff. So if you have a look there, he tends to do that job, which is keep them live, keep requirements live. They've got requirement sheets out there. They will tell you who the acquisition agents are and stuff like that. It might have been Guy Mordwy that did Cafe Nero back then, or you can go directly to the likes of Costa and the rest of it. So that's a really good resource to find what's requirements are in an area. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Would you, if you can't get access to some of the kind of blue chip tenants you want, would you suggest kind of making a list of kind of the ideal tenant you want, and then go about finding the real estate people in the divisions via LinkedIn or other means, or just calling them directly?
Again, I'd probably go to the local agents a bit. I mean, that'd be one thing. Obviously, you know, that commercial overlay that says who's dealing with retail units in that location. It's always the danger of like, how much do you give them versus sort of try and talk to them in rounded terms, isn't it? Is that you can turn around and say, well, I've got a property in the town, or, you know, something or other, and I'm thinking about doing something with it, or having that relationship with that local agent to try and, you know, but again, who's the mover and shaker in Farnham? You need to go on the commercial overlay and find out who's done the deals.
The other thing I think you can do with that is if if it's a Tesco's or a Co-op or something like that, then they've got big estates and they'll have agents instructed to dispose of whichever store's not performing the way they want it to, and this sort of thing. And so if you use the company export on Nimbus and look at the estate, you'll see it then links through to the people they're instructing. So you'll find then that those agents that they're instructing on their estate will then have obviously links into the estates team at those companies, and they then will be able to get a fee out of Tesco's on the acquisition side of things, which means that they're usually quite keen to get, you know, they're quite keen to see these opportunities and quite keen to sort of get them in front of the right people there, because they'll know who they are.
They tend to give a feedback. They might say, well, you know, it's not going to hit the forward. So, for example, the big convenience stores used to want £40,000 a week takings and stuff, and it was like, well, it doesn't meet that threshold. But some of the co-ops the regional co-ops might go slightly lower, and then you've got things like the Spars and the one stops to go. But they tend to give a feedback of, oh, there's this going on or this. So if you go to the bigger guys, they tend to be quite good. If you go to their agents, certainly if you go to the acquisitions thing, you've got the direct people, but you've also got the agents often there, and they're acting for them, and they get paid if they do the deal. So they're not acting for you. So you do tend to get quite a good bit of feedback about a location and from their sort of location planning and things like that. So that's always a good starting point.
Yeah, I think I'd kind of echo your point, Simon. So I think I'd start a requirements list. I'd sort of see what requirements there are in an area, see if see who's around. The actual surveyors can be quite hard to get hold of. They can be quite hard to actually get to answer the calls. And so if you've got one you particularly want to get in touch with, think it's particularly good for Tesco's or Sainsbury's or whatever it might be, then that's when I then start thinking about the instructing agents elsewhere that perhaps you might be able to get in touch with, that perhaps can get themselves a fee on the end of that. Often if you've got an agent, the agent's kind of easier to get hold of than the action surveyor at the firm themselves. So that would kind of be my answer to that, I think, Brad.
Perfect.
Okay, I can probably find the link. I mean, I think it's just requirementslist.co.uk. So I think he's just
yeah, I think you should Google the requirement list, you'll find it. So fabulous. Okay, right. Any more questions on the
Hello.
Romano?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi guys, thank you for a really good presentation.
Thank you.
Just a question on MA. Does your algorithm include like vacancies and remaining leases that may be present on the properties that we're looking at, or would that be kind of additional due diligence that we'd have to do?
Yeah, so we have an expiring leases sort of overlay that comes as part of the Elite Plus system. So if you upgrade into that, it will sort of show you when those expiring leases are there. It's a really interesting sort of debate really for me about whether you want that lease to be expiring or not. So in my head, the reason why I say that is, of course, I want the lease expiring, so I want to get vacant possession to do my development. Of course I do. But the interesting question for me is do you want that? If you've got a 3-year, 4-year lease in place, or 5, 6-year lease in place, then you're only buying the building for what the building's currently worth, because it's got this lease in place that means that's what it's worth, and these buildings go for this yield, and that's what the rent is, and therefore that's what I'm going to go and pay for it. And so it's very clear what that value is. What's also very clear is that the marketplace has moved through this thing called COVID that we, in case anyone else has forgotten of it, as I'm coughing a bit myself, I'm kind of sort of saying this. So so as the kind of world's changed, everybody, all the retailers, all the kind of, you know, people working from offices and this sort of stuff, that whole kind of marketplace has changed. And so speaking to those tenants that are in place and saying, well, actually, how are you getting on, and how has the world changed for you? The answer is, well, it will have changed, obviously, because it's changed for all of us. And then what are your aspirations? What do you need? Do you need the same space anymore? how about we re-gear? How about we look at surrendering or give you part or something like that? That's then gives you scope to do the kind of stuff that Dan Taylor was talking about yesterday, kind of, you know, re-gearing and give them a different amount of space and this sort of stuff. From retailers' point of view, now it's all about managing different channels. So how you manage, you know, no longer do you just stack a shop full of stuff and try and sell it. You have to manage your online presence and all that kind of stuff at the same time, and sort of manage those multiple channels, kind of what CACI were talking about in a webinar earlier in the summer. And so having those discussions, even with those leases in place, I think the leases being in place kind of creates a bit of opportunity. It's a bit counterintuitive, I think, because, you know, the lease being in place stops me doing the development, doesn't it? But what it does is it anchors the value of the building to what that rent is.
You can go to the shop manager. I mean, we did this at Pastimes, because it closed down, didn't it? But we sort of went to the sort of manager, how's it going, whatever it is, and we had a property in the centre of Leamington. We still, you know, the family still own, which was, I think, 45 grand downstairs. Full upstairs was just completely empty. Rent review came along and we re-geared the lease on a rent review to like 67,000, but they just took the downstairs, and then we did a 7-bedroom student scheme upstairs for a couple of £100,000. So with the lease in situ, you've probably got a bit of a negotiation, but also maybe go and walk into the shop and just speak to the manager and sort of, you know, go and find out how things are going. And
yeah. I think that's kind of part, sort of the short answer to your question, rather. The answer to your question is yes, we've got that in the platform. I suppose the longer answer is kind of whether that gives you the best position possible, or whether actually having that lease in place means that you can kind of work some of those opportunities. That will kind of that is often kind of how you can make the really big returns out of this stuff, because actually the owner doesn't realise the tenant wants to leave and hasn't spoken to the tenant, just keeps sending a rent invoice every quarter.
But we did this last year, didn't we, Paul? There's a tenant of ours in Leamington moved over to Spain, and he paid 10 grand to get out of the 3-year lease, and then we re-let it, and you could do some more stuff with the building then. So it's an interesting, I wouldn't necessarily discount it because there's a lease in place. It's almost like it depends how they're trading, it depends what's going on. If they've got a lease and they're not trading very well, they probably want to get out of it, depending on the covenant. And there's opportunities to make, you know, to let them off the dilapidations upstairs or do something. So the information is there.
A 3-month vacancy type thing.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
This is the other bit then. So kind of the plot thickens still. So Class MA, you have to have the building vacant for 3 months. And I think that's kind of interesting, because I suppose one of the fallbacks you've got is, you know, can I serve Section 25 notice, Class G or whatever it is, F4G, whichever one it is, for the for demolition reconstruction. So can I serve a hostile 25 Section 25 notice at the end of the lease to try and get the building back? Well, of course, I haven't got a planning consent under Class MA for that yet, so it's kind of quite hard to prove that. But of course, the new Class G PD rights, so today's been about Class MA, but Class G, which is kind of the extended version of the old shop uppers in effect, where you can put 2 flats above a shop back in the day, you can now do that across the wider Class E uses. And there's very few limitations on that. You don't need the building empty as part of that as well. So actually you could get a planning consent to do the upper parts, serve your hostile Section 25 notice to get them out, and then 3 months later go for your Class MA to go and get the change of use for the whole building in effect. So I think there's routes through is my short answer.
Nobody's closed that yet, but yeah, it's all new, isn't it? I guess that's the thing. So
absolutely. So that makes sense.
Okay.
Mark,
it does. Thank you very much.
Cool, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, it's 25 past 3. Do you want to take one more, or do you want
Yes. Let's. So Avanish has popped their hand up. Let's see if we can get Avanish to speak.
Hello.
Avanish, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. So I've been looking at the pricing. I see that Class MA commercial to residential, those overlays, HMO overlays, are they only available in Elite Plus, or are they available in Elite SE?
Yes, so the Elite Plus system is an upgrade from the Elite system. So you need to be on an Elite subscription with us for 12 months, and then you can upgrade into the Elite Plus system after that. Yes.
Yeah, the MA overlays, are they only present in Elite?
Yes, so Class MA is part of the Elite Plus system. Yeah.
And they get all four. You get all four for the for this sort of introductory August sort of offer, really. So they'll go up in price, and then you'll have to buy them individually, won't you? That's the.
Yes,
I did just put Jodie. Jodie's the sort of link. So if you don't, if you still want us to, they still want to have another demonstration or have a chat one-on-one with somebody, then Jodie's email I'll put it in again. But you can just email her if you fancy talking to somebody a bit more detail about it before. I'm sure she's got some availability before the end of the week if you do want to have a chat with anybody else and see a bit more detail. I know it's difficult to see everything live in your location here, so I'll just put that into the chat. So Jodie, just drop her an email if you could, so you can schedule in something for you if you want to have a chat with her. So that's okay. Paul, I'm just conscious of time and the audience is
let's
so I think
so fabulous. So just a quick reminder, so we've got the bundle that's running at the moment till the end of the week, so 27th of August, the introductory offer that runs out then. So that is the 4 strategies at a reduced price of 50% off, so £1,200 for the 4 strategies together, or indeed if you want the 90-day guarantee, so say I found a site in 34 seconds, if you can't find a site and in effect not entirely satisfied by the end of 90 days, then you have your money back. It's money back guarantee on that. And
that's 4 bundles. That's four things. That, you know, it's not just the MA. That's another three opportunities there as well.
Absolutely. So that includes, say, the 4 strategies, 12 months, one-to-one support from the team to ensure your success, and obviously the weekly deals clinic that comes from that. If you would like to tap into that or to take us up on that, then just put comment yes into the chat, and we'll get the team here to pick that up for you.
We want people to succeed, don't we? That's the whole point. We're here to help people succeed in their goals, so we want to make sure that they're, you know, we'll put the effort in to get you to be successful. That's the
Absolutely. So I think all that remains for me to do now is to firstly thank you, Simon, for your time today. Thank you for your help in the demonstration. And then thank you all for watching. It's been good fun today. We've had lots of fun with my big brother. So great fun. I've been Paul Davis. We've been Nimbus Maps. We'll look forward to seeing you all again soon. All the best. Bye for now.